So good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. This is Monday Live. Really good to see you here today. This is what we do every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. to try and figure out the future for smarter buildings. So really good to have everybody on board today. In case you're wondering who we are listed on mondaylive.org. Links to all of our profiles. And also, just a point that views expressed here on this hour are personal, not of any company or organization. Just keep that in mind. And as always, let's make things interactive on the Zoom chat. And if you do want anything that's on this slide deck, it is available on mondaylive.org as well on the homepage. So this being September, this is our third Monday in September, after having skipped Labor Day, obviously. And we're talking about innovation. We're sort of making a call to everybody to innovate. So let's innovate. So that's what we're doing. And today we're going to be talking about innovation in the value chain or of the value chain, depending on how you look at it. So really sort of interesting way of looking at innovation in terms of how it actually changes almost everything that we do in terms of the chain of products and technology that goes to our buildings. So discussion. But before that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken Sinclair for some news from automatedbuildings.com.
Thanks, Anto. On our Wednesday meeting there, we broke into a bit of a discussion and we started talking about the system of systems meta model. And I'd never heard that reference before. So I asked AI what it was and it spit back some stuff that was pretty interesting. It's getting used in the airports. I think what's happening in our industry is this whole integration model, and we thought of all the ordinary things we integrate into our systems, but we are now way beyond that into the system of systems. So anyway, I think that's a good read just to get another classification. It's being used in airports. It's good read. The unpacking of the future operational innovation was basically our summary of last Monday, and that includes Anno's remarks. And I think he did a great job of kind of pulling it away from all the technology and back to some of our basic problems. So that was good. The other one we got introduced to was the BACnet Cloud connectivity is collective. I'm sorry, it is BACnet Cloud Collective. And
bit of a tongue twister, right?
Yeah, that's right. But anyway, that's my third time at editing, and I still haven't got it edited in my mind right. But anyway, it's the BCC, and it's starting to generate some interest in the industry. I think everybody understands that BACnet has to move gracefully into the clouds, and I believe that this group is probably the people that are going to guide that. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got a link to our sneak preview of our sessions, 16 sessions for AHR Vegas. There's a real diversity of stuff. Really pleased with the way the whole program came together. We still don't have a confirmation and times and stuff like that, but it's all been submitted and virtually accepted to AHR. So it's starting to evolve, and we're starting to lasso and confirm speakers, and it'll be happening in the next few weeks. What else we got? We're a media partner of Smart Buildings in London, and they now have their complete conference program up. I see quite a few of our sponsors and some folks around Monday Live that are actually going to be there. So it's probably a good idea. It's great to see a program from Europe and just see how they're putting it together and just a little different thinking. And it's a good show. We're really pleased to be media sponsors of it. I think it's good synergy. And we've got how do you go big at scale? This is an article by Kimon, and 742 buildings, 9 colleges, thousands of users. I think it's explaining a different way of getting to our goals than we've done with the traditional MSI approach. And that seems to be evolving in the industry. There's a couple of ways of doing it. I think that's about it. Back to you, Anto.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ken. Moving on to C4SB update. Rick, what's going on?
A lot. The list of the working groups that's on the left, as we started with last week, where each week we'll highlight one or maybe two of real quickly of the updates of what's happening in some of these working groups. And I see that Mike Bordnero is on, and we'll bring him on in just a second to talk about what's happening with the asset leadership standard. Where is that one on here? Number 13, lucky 13. We'll have Mike spend a minute or two talking about some of the things that are happening there. Before I did that, I see, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening with the semantic buildings. Number 4, the whole idea of meta model came up, and we're starting to see examples of how the semantic buildings, specifically the ASHRAE 223P, is going to have a real effect on a lot of these different working groups and on the industry and some of the specific things. I won't go into tons of detail, but y'all should tune into what's happening with what Paris 2 is leading in the the semantic buildings, number 4, semantic buildings working group, and how that semantic buildings is going to affect several of these different other working groups. And that meeting happens on Fridays. We've got a calendar under C4SB, or calendar.c4sb.org, I think is the location of where we are starting to populate the different working group calendars. And there's several people that are on this call today on Monday Live that are actually participating in that semantic buildings call every week. And just want to bring more attention to that before we turn it to Mike.
Mike, I'm going to make it so that you can talk. So, Mike.
Hi, thank you. It's an honor to be part of the Linux Foundation's Coalition for Smarter Building Foundation, and even more of an honor that the Asset Leadership Standard is not a software code standard. It is a management system standard, but it's aimed at top management, because there are so many moving pieces in what's going on here with the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. We need to have a way to simplify the benefits for asset owners, for organizational owners, the C-suite, to understand why they should require their organization to use secure open source software foundations for their work. And so the Asset Leadership Network was created to promote the use of a asset leadership standard from ISO. But again, that's all in the details of doing the work. And what this asset leadership standard is going to be is the bouncing ball, follow the bouncing ball of what the C-suite can do to initiate their organization to get going in this. So there's things like having proper training and involving relevant parties. So that might be bringing in a consultant or other types of activities like that. And it's like all management system standards, it's not rocket science. It's simple, but it's very good for leaders to have in one short document, 3 or 4 pages, what they should be doing. So I'm taking Monday Live outdoors, and the neighbor is backing up with his truck. So I think that covers me for now. And you can probably mute. Oh, the music wasn't that loud. So anyway, that covers what I wanted to say. It's just great to be part of this and be focusing on what does that leadership suite need to know and understand and do. what are the actions they need to take.
Great. So every week we'll bring on somebody, and if you want to be featured next week, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll just pick on somebody like we did last week with Jim Lee.
Could you put that calendar URL in the chat?
I will.
Yeah.
I will attempt to do that. Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, we'll do that. All right.
Great.
Thank you, Rick. Any other thoughts or news or any updates from anyone before we move on? Hearing none, so let us proceed. So let's innovate, and innovation of the value chain or in the value chain. Maybe we can start with that. What I did was I actually went through the last 2 weeks of what we discussed last week and the week before, the two shows in September. And I sort of pulled out, just to remind us here, some of the things we talked about this month so far, about the sort of innovation and the sort of problems that we're talking about, the 96% unused data problem, the emerging IFC5, whatever that goes, standardizing models, mapping assets, various working groups we're talking about, the perspective from AI and automation, the sort of facility management perspective. I think that was one of the highlights from last week, the DBFM that Anno was talking about. He's not with us today. And networking and other things like extended reality and stuff. So open it up to the panel. Is it maybe we start there? Is it innovation in the value chain or of the value chain? Are we talking about things being introduced, or are we talking about the value chain itself innovating? Maybe we start there. Because I mean, I'm a technologist, so from a technology perspective, I look at the innovation as being something that's introduced into a value chain. But I think it's more to it than that.
Yeah, so that's an interesting perspective to me, actually. I hadn't thought about it that way. When we went into this topic, I was thinking in lines of where innovation is happening throughout the value chain of providing these solutions, not just using the building data to provide value, which is kind of what we've been focused on. But when you put it that way, there is innovation that has to occur throughout the value chain and the buying processes and mechanisms and mentality. And I'll give you a good example. When we started working with restaurants, our very first endeavor, not only did they not want recurring, like SaaS kinds of platforms, they didn't want the restaurants connected at all, right, to the internet. It was the old, no, somebody's going to hack me, there's security, I don't want Big Brother looking over my shoulder, when it was a franchisee to a franchisor kind of a thing. There's lots of reasons why that wasn't very accepted in the market space. But now it's a different story. It's kind of more the norm. And when people talk about procuring equipment, as a service, whether it be HVAC as a service or lighting as a service or anything like that, some of that innovation like that is already changing the value chain there quite a bit, right? Who's putting up capital, who's writing, who's recognizing it as OpEx versus CapEx. There's a lot of things in the value chain, I think, that are changing, but I don't think it's gone throughout the industry deep enough. I think this is still a pretty capital purchase intensive kind of marketplace. And I think that needs to change. And Jim, you've spoke a lot about that historically. You might want to add to that.
Yeah, I think that I see a lot of forces underway that are going to compel the innovation, so to speak. And as Tracy said, we've come from a capital world which doesn't address a lot of modern problems like the aging out of the workforce, cybersecurity, etc. So these are going to be drivers, and I see the value chain and basically reconfiguring itself around solving those problems. Question is how fast will that happen, and how entrenched are the buying behaviors and the contractual behaviors of organizations across our industry? And the answer is pretty damn entrenched. So it's going to be interesting to see how those things come together.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, Jim and Tracy. We're a SaaS company, and we're going to be true to ourselves. But I don't think we've had yet a commercial building customer that's actually paid the SaaS fee, the monthly SaaS fee. They go and cut POs for an annual, and they pay up front, which is even better. So the fact that, when we're going this 100% partner program, so it really doesn't much matter to us if the customer wants to pay the partner annually with the PO, we're still going to recognize the revenue as monthly for our purposes. So it's kind of like we worked out this hybrid where we don't have to have them engage in the OpEx, CapEx debate, because that's on our partner. If they want to sell it to the customer and engage with them cost wise as CapEx, we're still going to show it as OpEx because we're a SaaS company.
Same exact for us. It's really been a similar battle over the years that it's hard to get people to structure SaaS contracts. Eventually, they've gone over to using their traditional consulting contracts. But even that, is they're much more used to applying that on a project basis. So it's still tough, and they're very slow to move.
Yeah, and I'm basically not going to argue with somebody who wants to pay me a lump sum up front. Like it's like, okay, that's fine with me. We're mutually aligned on that.
Right.
It's interesting that they can understand a maintenance agreement that has to be paid and renewed annually, but if you call it a SaaS fee or a software fee, they get all uptight about it.
Yeah, and Danny made that point. Like, what about calling it a service contract? Like, that's how the building control folks are doing it. It's a monthly service contract.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but really
So
it isn't.
what's
Chief, what they're doing
happened?
is selling hours.
Well,
I mean, that's the way it's dressed up. So they
Yeah.
know how to buy hours, but they don't know how to buy SaaS.
Yeah, but it's a
Sorry,
not to exceed type of thing that, never, they always run it up to the limit of whatever the exceed, not to exceed price is. But it's a lot of accounting gymnastics, so
what happens in the IT space? I think Steve and Rick, you probably know quite a bit about how people.
Yeah, IT has gotten very comfortable with it. There's no real pushback around subscription in the IT world. That's why I think our industry thought this would fly, because at the C-suite level, the IT, the CIO goes in, presents his budget, has a bunch of subscription prices for the various packages they're buying. Just think about all the Office 365 subscriptions that are out there among employees, right? There's tons of them. And so, yeah, but in our industry, and I can, probably the most visible example is what's going on today with Tritium, Niagara licenses.
Yeah.
Okay? So Niagara licenses, they moved to having SMAs on all their products, and I can tell you there's so much resistance and pushback and dislike about all of it.
Sorry, you mentioned SMA for those that don't know what that is.
Yeah, software maintenance agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, software
So
maintenance.
that's a maintenance. So that's not really a SaaS mechanism. That's a maintenance mechanism, which is
it might as well be
right.
a SaaS, because for all intents and purposes, that's what it is.
Potato,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can stop it, certainly, and here's the gotcha is if you stop it and then you need an upgrade, you got to pay for all the back license or SMAs that you didn't purchase. Okay, so but all I'm saying is that there's a lot of dislike about that model within the Niagara community they are able to enforce it because they don't effectively have any other competition. So their monopoly position has allowed them to do that for now. Okay. But yeah, it's very interesting that when I ran an IT services company for 5 years, I ran into really no issue with regard to subscription pricing. We build
did
our
did
customers subscriptions
IT?
all the time.
So it looks like what's happening is that Tritium certainly, and maybe others are doing that, are using the SMA as potentially a sort of a hybrid mechanism, potentially to go towards SaaS model. Is that what's going on? And that does not seem to be working.
Well,
I see where, when we go through resellers who provide maintenance to the end user, they just bury this into their maintenance fee. It's part of their mechanism and how they deliver better maintenance to the customer. So there's a number of gymnastics, to use Keith's word, going on out there, I think.
Yeah.
You're speaking with, you're muted, Rick.
I'm just waving my hands. The managed service provider model is coming on in the IT world, or has come on. The outsourcing model was there for a while. The seat license model was there. There's a lot of innovation in the IT space beyond the SaaS part. The software as a service is what SaaS stands for, but star as a service should be kind of what we're thinking about, like service as a service, or facilities as a service, or 75 and sunny as a service. Those models are actually fairly attractive to owners. And that's what Anna was talking about last week, is that facility management as a service is what it provides. Workers just show up. Somebody is paid for the building to be there. CBRE takes care of everything to do with the facility as a service to the company that has their name on the building. And so these models are out there. I'm going to say something maybe controversial, but it's chicken and egg. If there's nobody willing to sell the service as a service, or the thing as a service, the people can't buy it that way. And what we did in the IT world is we changed it up and said, you can either pay for your computers and your software out of capital budgets, or you can rent them or lease them or whatever. But we went into the business of providing seat licenses, and people sat back and said, well, geez, that would allow me to not spend the capital and to put it into operation. But there had to be a vendor that was willing to do that. I'm not sure we've gotten that right from the vendor side. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
I would
People
say,
can't buy it unless somebody's.
but there are a lot of examples that our customer base is already experiencing, to whomever said it, Jim or whomever, Microsoft Teams licenses or Outlook licenses or whatever. Everything is going there. And the thing that we don't have is a leader in our industry who is also already doing this and kind of normalizing it, right? I think that's the piece that we're
I think
missing.
it's harder in our industry because if you look at the time cycles, it's very important. IT moves very quickly. They can innovate quickly because the product lifespans, the sales cycles, everything is much shorter. For us, we're tied to this 100-year-old plus construction specification institute bid and spec project model. And financially, inside the organizations, they have been taught from day one that any money that goes into operations comes off the yield of that asset. People look at real estate as if it's a bond. So the capital cost goes in there when the building's new, when the building is sold, there's a pro forma. At those points, capital is allowed to enter. But financially, organizations restrict operating cost as much as possible because that comes directly off the yield of that bond financially. And we've seen that for years and years. And, other things, when you started out with IT, maybe an IBM 360 was considered capital when somebody bought that. But almost all other IT has been expensed in the past 40 years, right?
Jim, but the one big difference in IT versus our industry, particularly on the compute side, is that servers, which were historically premise based, are no longer that way, right?
Right.
Virtually everything has gone to the cloud, and you buy your server, if you will, as you know, by the amount of memory, the amount of storage, the amount of processors that you use in some calculation thereof. And so that leaves just the workstations and the network hardware that people put under a capital budget. Where in our world, how much? 98% of what we do is deployed as devices in the building, from starting with the sensors to the controllers to maybe some network gear. So we don't have, except for the cloud apps like Keith's business, the rest of it is all premise based, which in the mindset of the owner, that's part of the building.
So
And like you said, the life cycle for that stuff in their mind is 10 to 20 years.
The thing is,
So
when
the-
something's part of the building, it becomes capital, and
Right.
investments in the building are capital investments, not
Right.
operating investments. If you
Not
need a new
investment.
roof, it's a capital investment.
Right. Yep.
So can we bring in Doug Migliori? So Doug is a new member of Monday Live, but today he couldn't get decent internet, so he's just on his phone. But he's put his hand up. So Doug, you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I was just trying to tie it all back to innovation. What you're talking about, Rick, you talked about the extending as a service to other things besides software. Well, there is actually a concept called everything as a service, and creating a service economy. And that really can help drive innovation if those services are offered really as outcome based. So it becomes outcome as a service. So you're not just being paid monthly for a software maintenance agreement, which just looks like a way for a service provider to just make more money without really adding more value. But if you look at innovation, it's really tied to value creation. And if you can tie services to outcomes, then that's value, right? So there is, just what we did with software as a service, which is really for the IT side. You can start to move that more to the OT side if you start to offer more of the equipment side as service. And then you start to bring in, it's not just a capital investment where you're selling an asset to a new owner and then it's all that new owner's responsibility, but the actual equipment provider has a vested interest in ensuring that equipment is leading to the outcomes that the consumer of that service is most interested in. So I think there is something to discuss around outcome as a service that can extend beyond just software service and go from IT to OT.
But isn't that just outsource FM basically? It's basically what CBRE does, what we were talking about last week.
I think it takes on a new dimension across any type of, if FM is management, you could say that it's asset management, facility management. All those managements have been around for a long time. But what is going to be a disruptor is the AI addition to those management systems, which is going to lead to new ways to optimize the performance of assets that are being controlled or affected by those systems. So I think it's not just your traditional management. It's going to be optimization, and what service provider is better able to demonstrate value enhancement or creation through the use of these AI enabled systems. And that's who you will really want to do business with, not just your traditional management.
That concept of so FM is kind of tightly defined already, and there's those competitors that but facilities as a service is, or everything as a service, or star, as I said, or outcomes as a service. Again, there has to be somebody willing to sell it that way. Here in Kansas City, we tried to buy an airport as a service. Airport as a service. That's what the Kansas City airport was supposed to be. And there was a group of companies that came together and said, hell, we will build the airport on our dime, and we will provide you an airport at that location as a service to the city. The city will pay a fee and it blew voters away. The voters voted it down because they couldn't handle that big of a change. But that's what was on the table, was airport as a service. And it got people thinking. We now have streetlights as a service. Streetlights, the lights that are up and down the street in Olathe and Overland Park and in Leawood. Those are actually owned by a separate company, but the light is provided as a service, not as a capital expense. And so getting people's heads, and then the color of the light can be changed. They can be flat. There's all these different services that can be layered on top of that. But getting people's heads around that outcomes as a service, it's a movement, but again, the industry has to be willing to come together and put a price tag on it and offer it up that way. And we're like sitting back and waiting for somebody to say, hey, I want to buy an airport as a service. And rarely does that happen. We have to, it's a chicken and egg thing, in my opinion.
Kimon?
But I think the tremendous value creation and really being able to do something that's never been done before kind of pushes through all that stuff. I mean, and I bet Danielle's on here. She probably doesn't realize this, but that we have a sister company that's through a common VC, and our CTO, John Majeski, is called Light, LYT, and they do AI traffic control. And they offer, it's called traffic safety as a service, I believe it is. So we've been trying to partner up with them for years, but they're getting some great businesses. They're getting a lot of munis and stuff. They just won like Pasadena, Richmond. So they're at the municipality level. And what's fascinating about it, what our VC and CTO John said, it's like it's a similar industry because all the traffic control systems are like from the 60s and 70s, and they're antiquated and they're all proprietary. So our sister company Light, they're in the same situation as we are with the building control, but the reason that they pushed through that and was able to offer safety as a service or traffic safety was the tremendous increase in response times for the traffic, for ambulances. Their tagline literally is light saves lives. So the tremendous, like you get people to the hospital, 15 minutes earlier or 5 minutes earlier, what a huge difference that makes. So the value proposition is literally about saving lives, and it's so huge that they were able to push through all the red tape and the proprietary nature and the buying, traffic systems. Like that's got to be the oldest technology at the utility level at scale, it's in cities. So, great analogy.
Kimon, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just interesting going off of what Rick said too, and the previous discussions about a hybrid approach that Keith talked about. So there's several issues from an innovation perspective. Obviously, we can all, as technologists or service providers or SaaS providers, we can innovate and do this, right? But the industry, with the contracting methods that they have, they're still stuck on projects and delivery of things at sequences and get paid at that point in time. And we've had experience after experience because we have a SaaS product that is essentially BIM, CMS, IWMS. So that, yeah, they'd love to have monthly, yearly, whatever it is, get through all of that. And all of a sudden the legal comes in and says, well, here's our boilerplate agreement as an owner. And it's project based. And not only is it project based, but there's all these ownership clauses that they own all the IP, which starts clashing into, well, okay, how do you actually make that work? So from an innovation perspective, I think as an industry, we need to surface those challenges and even have solutions. Okay, if we're going to provide this as a service, how can you do a whole airport as a service? Yeah, technically we should, but then probably legally and contract, all that stuff just gets in the way immediately, I think. And it'd be interesting to kind of catalog what's the best practice for that innovation transition that needs to happen.
That seems to be a cue for you, Jim, because it's about how you buy it, right?
Yeah, well, I think that that we've been fighting this for a long time, but I think that there are fundamental changes coming, and what's going to save us here is not the forward-looking nature of the buying apparatus of the customers. It's not going to be the procurement department. It's not going to be their legal department. What's really going to happen is they're going to get forced into this. They'll be, as Steve had said, IT has blazed the way. So it's not that people haven't seen this kind of behavior, but when you can no longer acquire what you need, and cybersecurity will be the example I'll give. You can say all day long that I want to buy cybersecurity and spec it in when I build a new building, but the threat actors are not standing still. So the cybersecurity you spec in today will probably be laughable 7 years from now, 3 years from now. Who knows how long it'll take? But there are things in life that are a process, not a product or a project. And because of that, basically things are going to be forced to change. I don't know what people think of that, but I think that is the way that innovation is going to happen. Necessity is the mother of invention.
I kind of want to say forced by who, but you're sort of talking about the circumstances or just the evolution of things, right?
I think it's going to be forced by expense, right? I think that, if you look at these large organizations, the ones that I know right now, they're basically paying large fees, big chains of universities, healthcare, pharma companies. There's a lot of basically extortion going on from cybersecurity people, which is not being reported right now or not made very public. And I think that as that starts to roll through, financial decision makers who are paying, there's an awful lot of phishing attempts out there, and some of them are working. And I think that people are beginning to see a real cost. And as that cost comes into OT networks, I think that people will be compelled to pay. And I think they'll get smart and understand that it's not a one-time fix, right? It's a recurring problem. It needs a recurring solution. And the same thing with their aging workforce. If your aging workforce with knowledge of what's going on is no longer there, it's not something you fix once. It's a recurring thing. So if we're going to use technology and AI and these other things to replace the talent that we have retiring out right now, by nature of the fact that the problem is ongoing, the solution is going to have to be ongoing, and they're going to be forced to accept that. That's my thesis anyway.
Sounds reasonable to me anyway. David, you're trying to change things up a little bit with the project that you're working on. Is there anything you can chime in with regards to what we're talking about?
Well, is the topic supply chain?
Well, we call it value chain, which is really supply chain, which is really the chain of stuff. But I think your point is that we've sort of gone off track a little bit.
Kind of. Also to remind me, but what we've been talking about is the acquisitions model for services and how different services and work is acquired. And for facility management. And the value chain, I'm not sure what does value chain mean? And I'm purely asking these questions to understand what are the definitions we're using for the discussion, because it's not clear to me. What do we mean by value chain?
I certainly regard it as being another way of thinking about the supply chain, because the supply chain is pushing value towards the end result, which is the customer that has a problem. But maybe that's an oversimplification of the difference.
I think when we were talking about the other day too, we were pointing out things like, when it comes to innovation and some of the innovation that's happening, the value isn't going only to the end user. The value is also going to suppliers along the way as well,
Right.
in this whole thing, right? So if I'm a provider of a building management system and AI lets me deploy faster, gives me better information, I can track my system better. Those are all things that help me become a better manufacturer, a better provider, independent of the additional benefits that it gives to the end user as well. So innovation isn't only just about the innovations that end up in the end user building, it's also about the innovations that help the supply chain deliver a better system to the end users. Does that make sense?
It does. That's very helpful too. Thank you.
Yeah.
So really, we're looking at the value delivered to all of the participants along the supply chain. Is that a good way of defining it? Okay. And then how AI can accelerate that in some ways. So
yeah, or
when
any
I
innovation.
look at what the holy, okay. So when I look at this, really the standout, the holy grail we've kind of always talked about on and off is a proactive methodology to managing buildings instead of reactive, where there's automation that can work with people being in the building, moving around dynamically around the building. And then also, the system is counting the hours on the fan unit to know the filter change and can send in the request to the offsite storage to get that put on the truck to come to the embassy or whatever. And then the ticket's open, but it's a low priority ticket to change the filter. And could AI help any of this? Yeah, absolutely. But really, it's still what I think, to me, is still the struggle, is that humans are in the center of all of this, and none of it's written down, or very little of it's written down. And there's no playbooks, there's not necessarily any procedures. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, and of course, there are organizations that have this very dialed in. But really, what I'm striving to understand is how the value chain is actually, with AI, going to disintermediate things and take people completely out of the chain that were in intermediary positions along the way or something, and how the whole value chain is actually going to get upended by AI.
By AI, or by AI as innovation, or by innovation that AI enables, or by other innovation?
All of the above.
All of the above.
All of the above.
So, David, I got a question for you with regard to, because you're very end user focused, and you're in talking about supply chain. I want to actually kick it up a level above that and just describe the term that we've been using for 50 years, which is facility management. So you build a building, you got a facility you need to manage. It's a very broad, potentially very broad term that encompasses anything and everything, from cutting the grass to changing light bulbs to securing entrances and so on, right? So in that sense, from the owner's perspective, what's the conversation that your owners have around how to approach managing their facility? When do they decide that a certain scope is something they're going to do with their own employees versus subcontract out to various firms in some fashion based on what it is that needs to get done? But at the end of the day, you roll it all up. I got a building that needs to get managed. From the owner's perspective, again, how do they think about that fundamental question?
It depends on the type of MBA guy you have sitting in that chair who, like, let's outsource it. Can we outsource it? We'll save money by outsourcing. And then it gets outsourced, and then 3 years later it gets insourced again, and it flips back and forth. But I'm being a little facetious with that. To answer your question, Steve, it really depends on the ownership structure of the building asset itself. When you have a big organization like a university, they have a machine to manage and run all their buildings. You'd think that other, like a Microsoft or Amazon, run their buildings, everything changes all the time. But the argument JLL and CBRE is like, you do what you do best and let us run your buildings for you. And I've seen this firsthand where the facility management team is cycled out every 2 to 3 months. So there's no institutional knowledge in the facility management team whatsoever. And it's really only the guys who are like the maintenance guys who nobody really cares about. They're the ones who's keeping the whole thing running. And the people who, and it's the people who are at the front desk who respond to the heat and cold calls and stuff. Those people change all the time with CBRE and JLL. What's the motivation? It depends on the ownership structure. Usually this only changes when a building changes hands. When it's acquired by a new owner, they usually go, okay, we can start over. And they usually, fire JLL and now it's CBRE. But like we talked about last week, the maintenance guys who are taking care of the central plant or whatever, they just switch t-shirts and they stay with the building. So unfortunately, the biggest driver for a lot of commercial real estate is I want to have my facility management fee be 1.25% instead of 2%. And so they just find somebody who'll do it for 1.25% and then deal with it. And it's purely just to get more net operating income to their investors.
But to your point about institutional knowledge, maybe that's the area where technology can provide some real benefit, is to capture the institutional knowledge through, starting with BIM, but then as things evolve, which they always do, is, in other words, I got to change out this, upgrade that, whatever it might be, that information gets captured effectively, so that as I have this turnover in headcount, which is naturally going to occur, I'm not having to retrain per se. I have a source of knowledge that's accurate, that the new person coming in, who would, in theory, understands the difference between a light bulb and a building controller, and just needs to know what's the wattage of the light bulb and where do I get it from, and so on. But they're not having to physically go out into the building and try to figure out what the hell is there, because we've done an effective job of capturing and maintaining an accurate information blueprint, if you will, of that facility.
That's definitely the ideal, and it's definitely something I am striving for all the time, is having better data. And to Roger's point in the chat, the GSA deployed SkySpark to manage electricity usage and energy usage at a lot of GSA buildings. That kind of baseline information can be really valuable.
Sure.
The challenge is the threshold between this easily available like metering data and then the guy who has the institutional knowledge, who's been there forever. When that person goes away and hasn't handed his institutional knowledge to someone, that's what we're facing all over the world right now with all these different buildings. And we have not yet come to a point yet where the AI and the data tracking from BMS systems and leveraging documentation and BIM models can make up for it. But that's where we're going for sure.
So
Didn't
are we waiting for AI to be able to replace that institutional knowledge? That seems far-fetched.
Yeah, I think we'll get to a point, unfortunately, where there is no institutional knowledge. And you just go to the building with your toolkit and you're told, here's the job today. I mean, but of course, that's one extreme. The other extreme is you're going to have, you know, the lifers in the buildings. I think there'll always be those folks at hotels and hospitals where you have maintenance and things breaking all the time and you need incessant repair. I think those are the places where you'll be able to keep that institutional knowledge. It all depends on the building type and the owner structure.
Didn't we invent the TXO to try and to evaluate this value and demonstrate it? And really isn't what we're talking about is a collection of TXOs?
Cue Rick Justice.
Yeah, to Rick Justice, yeah, actually. And there was a lot of talk that way about all, you know, what is the total cost of operations, and it had to be looked at from a bunch of values. Is it a tool?
Yeah, that tool, we're trying to get, as one of the working groups, the C4SB Foundation, we're trying to get the TXO tooling, whether it's a dashboard or a tool. We're trying to get that out so that people become aware of where, you know, what is the total cost for different types of buildings, life cycle cost, total cost. And one of the things I was kind of surprised about, so stay tuned for news from that working group, the TXO working group. But the idea is that we should have, I'll say like a dashboard or a site where you can go and you can, you know, use some drop downs and change some sliders and get an idea of, you know, where your portfolio or where your building fits, depending on type and geography and that sort of thing. So, because I really don't think people have a clue what the different components are of cost. And then specifically, you know, should I be outsourcing? The whole make versus buy argument, like I think David was just saying, you know, depends on the MBA person that's sitting there and saying, oh, we should outsource. Nope, we should bring it back. Nope, we should outsource. Nope, we should bring it back. I don't think anybody really has any idea of what the total number is, and therefore they don't know, you know, what the opportunity is for a better TCO or a better TXO or a better flight path. And I was quite frankly surprised that nobody asked last week, how much are those facility management contracts worth? I've heard JLL and CBRE thrown around a ton of times today. Does anybody have a slight clue what it costs to have CBRE or JLL operate your buildings versus doing it yourself? Oh, one hand. I see one hand. You don't have to answer that. I'm just saying, the point is nobody really has any idea of how big is the bread box of what the opportunity is, and where can I use technology to specifically adjust how much I'm spending. Maybe I should spend more on maintenance because the life cycle would run longer. Maybe I should spend less. You know,
I guess, Rick, that was my point about rolling this back up to the facility management question is, are there good industry statistics that says if you have this building type, your cost of facility management is X percent? Right.
And that's what the TXO tool, and we do this manually right now. So if somebody was to say, and we've been engaging this way for 15 years with different people, we use the paper version to figure out what the best practices are, and we use research. But we're trying to get that to be a publicly available tool. But yes, there are, but nobody knows what those numbers are. I mean, is it $15 a square foot? Is it $45 a square foot?
Yeah, how much is it per square foot? Where do you get those numbers from? So if you're evaluating, if I own a building and I'm looking at my facility expense, do I know, am I good, bad? Where do I fit in the universe?
You know, you would think, I mean, everybody knows what it costs to lease a Hyundai Santa Fe because we see the ads on TV all the time, $339 a month. We know exactly what certain things cost. We have no idea what it costs to run a building, which is frankly absurd.
Because it's not available in a digital format. If we have it locked in our heads or the color of the T-shirt, it walks out the door. So as an owner, if we're going to get total anything, we need to get total access to everything, which goes back to innovation. It needs to be in some kind of digital format. It needs to be accessible. Then it's useful, because no amount of AI is going to be able to pull stuff off of people's heads if they walk out the door.
And that's basically what Roger just posted on chat. That it's ultimately what we've been talking about is really about having data and information about the building, right? Because the institutional knowledge, a lot of that is data and information. Some of it obviously is kind of the gray matter in the guy's head, but most of it is the substance that we should be really, really capturing and organizing.
Captured at the source in a digital format and then made accessible, because otherwise it gets archived or lost.
Well, as we flush out the total cost of a TXO, it's going to prove the same problem we've all got, is not enough data. But the other thing is, I'm not sure that the TXO was talked about far enough back that we haven't done a lot of AI interrogation on it. And I think if we start fluxing out that committee, we're going to find that we don't have the data, which we really know we don't already have. But if we can take it in pieces and start to get pieces of it that seem to have better value and demonstrate that, I think it's a really good place to start growing. And another project for Rick. How good's that?
Okay, I think this has been, we're going to start to wrap up. Tracy, do you want to wrap this up?
Sure, I can try. I think we're in agreement that there's a lot of room for innovation in what we're doing. There was some discussion today about needing to change procurement mindsets and methodologies, and that may or may not go very quickly, depending on which segment you currently operate in. But maybe the most important thing is getting AI and innovation into the entire supply chain is really what we're talking about when we're talking about this, adding AI to buildings. It's not just to the building, it's all the way throughout the supply chain and everything that goes along with that. I think there's a lot of value that can be passed on if we start thinking of it more from the beginning to the end, as opposed to just the end point on that.
Agreed.
Which is the chain part, the value chain, the supply chain, value chain part. Okay, great. Thank you, Tracy. Thanks, everyone. This has been a great conversation, as always. Hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you back next month.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
while.